Okay, I have 6 p.m. here in Pacific. Hope everyone is staying warm, depending on the weather that you're having. Just in case nobody knows me, my name is John Hawley. I'm the Los Angeles Region Program Lead or Sheltering Program Lead. And I usually work with Vesta, or I'm sorry, I usually work with Iwei Chen, who has been my mentor for a good couple of years now, and I really admire her work. um, well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to week 4 of the second season of the Pacific Division Sheltering Capacity Building Series. We have approximately 15 sessions with the most requested topics from all of you. Each session will have the same team's link. This meeting will be recorded and the link will be sent out within a week with slides. All recordings are also posted on YouTube. You can search for the Red Cross Pacific Division on YouTube. Your camera and mic have been disabled. You're able to type your questions in chat, and the mic will be open at the end for our Q&A. The goals for our division series are: build our workforce confidence, provide practical tips for mass care sheltering operations, including lessons learned from Hurricane Ian, I would assume. Provide a collaborative environment across all functions. Provide a networking opportunity for all regions. I encourage you all to type your name and region in the chat and say hi to each other. That's always my favorite part. Increase local volunteer engagement by empowering each region to host/present at least one session. Today, we welcome back Jody Wallace again. She's been on 4 times. She's amazing, from Northern California coastal region, to talk about the second part of how to be a great shelter supervisor. If you're not a shelter supervisor, we encourage you to listen to the session. Everyone has a chance to be field promoted to supervisor, and we want to make sure you're prepared. And with that said, Jody, would you like to take it away?
Okay, so I want to make sure you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Yep. Okay, good evening, and thank you guys for all joining us again. Unfortunately, my cohort, Roxanne, is still enjoying the vacation. So I'm going to wrap this up tonight, and hopefully we'll be able to share some really great tips to you guys. Hopefully you will remember a lot of the stuff that we chatted about last week. What we did last week was we pretty much went over a lot of the basics that we want to know and be prepared before we deploy. And in a lot of cases, the information actually applied regardless of the gap that you have. All right, so I'm hoping that everyone walked away with, possibly a couple things that maybe they didn't know before, or possibly got a little bit more clarification on. So tonight we're going to talk about more of the nuts and bolts of actually opening, running, closing a shelter, and exactly the duties and responsibilities of a shelter supervisor. All right, so we talked a little bit last week about your shelter SV may either have you acting as a supervisor reporting to the shelter manager, or possibly the shelter manager themselves. So once we have gotten the word that we need to open in a shelter, these are some of the specific duties for each job, right? This shelter manager, as we know, is responsible for overall the shelter. And so the first thing basically I do when I walk in is I want to do a walkthrough of the facility. I want to take a look and just make sure, does everything look okay? Do things look like they're working? We just did our floods in California, and because we were opening and closing shelters so quickly, the facilities had not had an opportunity to go through a lot of these. And so we needed to go back and do the opening checklists. So my suggestion would be, when you go into a shelter, in your shelter manager kit, right, pull out the opening checklist and use it to walk through the facility. Make notes of anything that might not be working, or take a picture of any damage that you might see. So the objective is that we need to turn the facility back over to the owner. We want to make sure that we are not being held responsible for any damage that was already pre-existing. We want to make sure we're assessing the supplies and the equipment, and that stuff that's coming out of the trailer, or possibly things that have already been dropped off. take a look and get an idea of what do you have in hand and what are the things that you're needing to be added later. Identify your supervisors. Now there are cases to where your team is assembled at headquarters. There are cases to where you might be out at the shelter and your team is meeting you. So in that case, figure out who your supervisor is and work with your supervisor to help create your staff planning. So who is on your day shift, who is on your night shift. Supervisors, part of what your responsibility is going to make sure is that you are basically overseeing all the shelter associates. You want to give them an orientation on the job, right? What the responsibilities are, what we are doing. I always like to do an orientation when people arrive, regardless of the orientation that they might have received at headquarters. Supervisors can help work with the manager to decide what's the layout of the shelter going to consist of, and you pass those directions on and have the essays help you put that together. If you need to cover the floors, if you're setting up cots, whatever that includes. And then also you want to work with your shelter manager to make sure what are my areas where I'm setting up for my registration desk? Where is my disaster health services and disaster mental health going? Do I have an area that's going to be set aside for pets? Right? So the coordination between the shelter manager and the supervisor, very important at this part. All right, so obviously this is a very old picture of a shelter. We're not quite that close yet. Once we have our shelter open and now we're functional, right? Giving everybody an idea of what we are doing. These are the types of things that you can expect to be doing as well. We generally get the shelter set up and open. We want to be able to get clients in and accommodated. But at that point, it's always great to take a step back, look at what we have set up in place, and see if there are ways to possibly improve or streamline what we have set up. And a lot of times it's really great because somebody comes in with a fresh eye and may look and say, oh, perhaps that might work if we do this instead. So what I always say is, even if we're the ones that are setting up the layout, keep an open mind, be open to suggestions from somebody else. And again, remember, sometimes it's a fresh pair of eyes because we are focused on getting the shelter set up and open to receive clients. Somebody else may have a really good suggestion. If your essays come to you with an idea, go and talk to the shelter manager. And I always tell the essays, we may not be able to implement all suggestions, or it just might not be the right time, but I always encourage people and thank them. You know what? I appreciate that you took the time and you thought of that. Let's see which one of these suggestions we may be able to implement. Integrate yourself into the team. A good supervisor is not only a working supervisor, there's somebody who their essays know they are caring, they're helpful, they want their essays to be successful as well. But again, you're a supervisor and you need to be in your shelter, working with your clients, seeing what's going on, and that gives the shelter manager the ability to be looking at the bigger pictures. Work with your team, have conversations with your SA, get to know what are their strengths and their weaknesses. And a lot of times that's important because let's say that you've got somebody who's a little bit on the shy side, but you need somebody to run the registration desk. So what you can do is maybe you have that person sit with someone who's a little bit more outgoing and a little bit more comfortable, showing them how to get those conversations going with clients. Right? So we want to encourage them and we want to come across as supportive. So I never want to stick anybody in a position to where they are uncomfortable doing it. And in most cases, if you sort of buddy them up with somebody to help them learn that job, you would be surprised how much this person will come out of their shell and can really shine. And remember, be a mentor and a model to your service associates, right? We lead by example. People will model your behavior, both good and bad. If we want to have good, strong service associates, then we need to give them something to model their behavior after. Also, understand what the manager's expectations are. Have a conversation with your shelter manager to find out from them what are the specific tasks that they would like you to be in charge of. Some shelter managers are more hands-off in the respect of, okay, you're overseeing this. If you need if you have problems or you need something, come to me and we can talk about it. Other shelter managers maybe want to be much more involved in sort of the day-to-day, hour-by-hour dealings. So talk to the shelter manager and find out what their particular style is. Shadow the shelter manager, right? Again, as a supervisor, there is the potential to be one, field promoted, or you may decide that you like the idea of being a shelter manager and you want to take the additional class that we talked about last week, which is a specialty gap. And tell your shelter manager, you know, I'd like to learn from you. And I have not met anybody who, one, doesn't look at that and realize that they have the opportunity to help build a strong supervisor who can be a strong shelter manager. Again, my personal philosophy is teach somebody the right way so that we don't have to go back and break bad habits down the road. Work in reconciling the registration binder, right? We know within the first 48 hours, things are busy. People are coming. It's very crazy. After several days, we should be able to go through and start determining which clients are still at the shelter, which clients have left but did not let us know that they left. And also let your people at the registration desk know to talk with the clients and say, you know, if you guys determine that you are ready to leave the ready to leave the shelter permanently, please let us know. We always ask. That doesn't always happen, right? And in that case, 4 or 5 days is a good time to start going through and trying to reconcile that binder and get it as current as possible, right? We're taking the clients that are no longer there, and we may either put them in the back of the binder, or maybe we put them somewhere else for safekeeping, right? The objective is if we can keep our registration binder as current and up to date as possible. Work on monitoring the out processing days and the days off for your team. That's a really important one. We don't want to ever be shorthanded, right? If you look and you go, gosh, I'm going to have people off on this day, but I only had a team of 4, you let the shelter manager know. They make the call to headquarters and say, hey, I need someone who will be able to come in and help cover for the people who have days off. Likewise, as we talked a little bit last week about out processing days, work with your shelter manager. Make sure that you guys are carefully monitoring when people will be out processing from the operation so that you know exactly when to put in your request for additional staff. Again, as I emphasized last week, get to know your clients, spend the time. This is the part of our mission that these are what makes the memories, right? We go home knowing that we made a difference to someone. Ensure that your night shift understands what their responsibilities are, how they do their nightly head count, right? We call it heads to beds. It's a little bit different at times now, but we need to know still how many clients are staying in the shelters, and we need to make sure, confirm with the shelter manager, what time is our head count due and who are we reporting it to? Are we reporting it to somebody at headquarters, or are we going to report it to Frost ourselves? So these are the details that you want to make sure of. Questions. Questions are never bad. If you're not sure, as we touched on last week, make sure that you ask. All right, encourage your staff to ask questions, and your clients as well. Again, there's never such thing as a bad question, just bad answers, answers that somebody may give without checking out the facts. We want people to ask the questions, because what that does is that shows you are paying attention. You see them, both your staff as well as your clients, and you know, you care. I'm putting in the time. Somebody asks me a question, it's important that I get that answer and I get it back to them. And remember, trust is built on follow up and follow through. If you tell a client you will have an answer, it's important that either you get the answer and get back to the client, or if you will not be there, then you talk to your shelter manager and say, I have this pending. I need to get back to Mrs. Jones. Could you please get this taken care of? Again, the worst thing is when you out process and go home and Mrs. Smith comes up and says, but I was working with so-and-so, but I haven't received an answer, right? We want to close that loop. We want clients to feel that we appreciate their trust, and then when we share information, it is accurate. Here I've listed a bunch of the other group activities that you may interact with shelters. Things like disaster health services, disaster mental health, spiritual care, we see them a lot. Logistics, these will be the guys coming by with the trucks to see what items you may be in need of. We've got feeding, shelter resident transition. There are a lot of other groups that you will be interacting with, including, so now these are some of our internal partners, but including other external partners, right? These could be county or state people, Health and Human Services. A lot of times we have veterans organizations and other groups that are coming in to see what they can do to help as well. If somebody comes in and you're not sure who they are, ask, right? If you're a little shy about that, if somebody gives you an answer and either you're not sure who that is or you're not sure if it sounds right, as long as you kindly ask someone, could you please wait a minute? I'll be right back, and grab your shelter manager. But realize that a lot of these other groups are going to be interacting with you as well.
Hey, Jody, we have a question. I'm not sure if we want to save this to the end. If a person wants to stay in their car in the parking lot, but wants to come in and out of the facility to use restrooms, snacks, etc., do they have to complete a shelter intake form? How do we track them going in and out?
No, they don't have to, right? As long as we don't have a reason to let them back into our dormitory area, but if they need to come in and use the bathroom or snacks or water or meals, we do that. If they're staying in, that kind of works two ways, right? Sometimes we've got clients and they are staying out in their cars. If we can get them registered and get a wristband on them, that's great. A lot of times we can't, all right? And so we don't push that. I always do try and ask first. But the biggest thing is if they're just coming in for specifics, I'm feeding them and they need to use the bathroom, as long as they're not walking around my dormitory, I'm not going to worry about it. Now, if they come in, they do have to sign in at the registration desk. Okay.
And Martin mentions that he doesn't see the LSAP gap mentioned here. I'm just assuming that there's a lot of gaps that aren't mentioned yet.
You know what? Thank you. You are so right. I absolutely forgot LSAP, Life Safety Asset Protection. And we work with them a lot and we will be seeing them a lot. So thank you for catching that. I did miss that. All right, so now hypothetically, we've had our shelter open, let's say for a week, and then we get the call and they say, hey, we're going to be closing down the shelter. What we try and do, right, we want to give clients a 24-hour notice, right? So the shelter manager may come over to you as the supervisor and say, okay, we need to post a sign saying we will be closing at this date at 12 o'clock noon, right? So you want to get those signs posted for your clients. Giving clients a good goodbye is very important. We took care of them. We wanted them to feel safe. We want them, when they leave the shelter, to feel that they have been with people that cared about them and their circumstances. And some of the ways that we can do that is help people pack and label their belongings. You can help them move things outside as well. Although we cannot do transportation, a lot of times they will have transportation. Maybe it's by county, maybe somebody will be picking them up. Whatever it does, right, we can assist them. And a lot of times what I will try and do is put together snacks, right? If I've got snacks and water and things that are left over, we may take Ziploc baggies and pack stuff up and send them home with people. Again, it's sort of a small thank you and letting people know that they were important to us. And those little things really can make a difference for people. So once all your clients are gone, we're going to clean, we're going to break down, and we're going to pack up our cots, which is a trick within itself. We're going to start looking at packing up and closing down the other areas, right? Everything in our registration area, our kitchen, the dormitories, the bathrooms. We want everything to be packed up. If things were pulled out of the trailer, we want to put them back in the trailer. If logistics is going to come and pick everything up, then what we want to do is we want everything put together and piled up neatly. If there is a roll-up door somewhere they can get to easily. If not, you may end up having to put them against a wall near the front door. But the objective is that when logistics comes by, they're not trying to gather everything from multiple places across the shelter. Everything should be waiting for them in one central location. Make sure that you take down signs both inside and outside, which seems really obvious, but sometimes those are the things that we forget until the last minute. And make sure that you've pulled them from the outside as well. And then any records, we're talking about client registration forms, shelter manager logs, any documentation like that, the shelter manager or supervisor, we want to secure those, and then they're going to need to get brought back to headquarters and turned in there. All right, so again, the objective is we load it into the trailer what we can, and anything else waiting for logistics is going to be left neatly waiting for them. And actually, a lot of times what we've done is we may take pictures of the items that we're waiting for logistics. So that gives them an idea of where exactly we've got everything going. And it may also help determine what size box truck or vehicle that they're going to come by and pick things up with.
Jody, we have a question. What are current recommendations for cot sanitizing?
My suggestion is pull it up in the exchange. There are instructions. Things have gotten more specific on how we do things now. There's a solution that they bring in, and there's brushes. So my suggestion is, for the best details, go onto the exchange and it will tell you exactly how they want cot cleaning done.
And a question from earlier, for those, do those that aren't registered need to be escorted?
You know, depending on the layout of the room. So a lot of times, again, depending on where I have kind of my snack area or my bathrooms, if it's something close by the registration, people walk by themselves. If there's maybe something I have to take them a little bit of a kind of a different route, I may send somebody with them to make sure they get where they belong. And if I have areas that are off limits to them as far as my dormitory area, right? Because again, we are responsible for the privacy and safety of our clients. I will tell people, this is the area. You're welcome to have a snack and a drink, sit down here, right? When you're done, we need you to walk out the front door as well, right? Again, I want to say it depends on the layout of the shelter. if that needs to be done or not. And I'd leave that up to the shelter manager's discretion. The biggest thing is that we do not allow people to wander into the dormitory area who are not sleeping there. The other thing is, a lot of times if you've got one room, it's a matter of, is there a way that you can talk to the facility owners to see if there is some type of curtain or something that you can put up that will keep the dormitory area visually, nobody can see into that. I've had to flip up cafeteria tables. We've had facilities people come in and literally build us out of PVC pipe and kind of drapes, something to block the dormitory area from the front door when somebody walks in. So we try very hard to protect our clients' privacy.
Great, thank you.
All right, and housekeeping, right? So again, remember, it's really important that when we turn the facility back over to the owners, I was a Girl Scout leader and I'm an Eagle Scout mom, and it was always in Scouts, right? You leave something better than you found it. So we make sure we've got all the trash cans are emptied, tables and chairs are stacked up. We run, sweep the floor. I've had facility guys who will come in and say, don't worry about mopping, my janitorial staff will come in, and that's great, but we still want the floors swept. We still want the facility to look like we're leaving it organized as a thank you. And if there is someone that is there when I'm leaving from the facility, doesn't always happen, but if there is someone who does a walkthrough with me, I always make sure to tell them, thank you so much for letting us use this. The same way we want to leave clients with a good goodbye, we want to leave them with a good goodbye, because down the road we may want to call and say, is this facility available again? So we want them to have a very good thoughts when they think of the Red Cross. So if by chance we're going back in there in another time, they know that we are going to be taking care of their place. If you leave something looking like a train wreck, people are not going to want us back, right? So leave this the same way you would leave your mom's house, is what I actually tell people. All right, so supervisors and their service associates, as we talked a little bit about before, as a supervisor, you have the opportunity to train and turn out really great service associates. New people who come in who've only been on deployment a couple times, and maybe they've only worked in non-congregate shelter, right? You have that opportunity to turn them into someone who goes to the next supervisor and the next operation confident in their abilities, and that next supervisor or shelter manager realizing, wow, this is a person who's very valuable, knows what they're doing. So part of what your job again is, provide job orientations, right? Even if somebody is only doing one or two of the tasks at the shelter, make sure that they understand exactly the whole big picture of how do we run a shelter, right? Walk them through them, let them again ask questions. As you are having people out process and the new ones are coming in, make sure that you integrate those new service associates into your team. Sometimes it's a little tricky, right? You walk in and it's very obvious that this is a team of multiple people that have been working together just by the way they talk or laugh, they work together. So you want to make sure that you are pulling and integrating that new person so that they become part of that team as well. Provide guidance and mentorship and make sure, again, they know that you are there to help them problem solve if there's any issues, and you're there to help them learn. Again, it comes down to people need to know that you're always approachable to ask questions. Train your service associates on the importance of counts. We talked a little bit before, right? We've got head counts that we do at night, but we need to know what's our count of cots and comfort kits and blankets every single day, so that when the fulfillment trucks come through, or medical cots, right? I need to know what inventory I have in order to be able to know what I'm going to need and ask for from the fulfillment trucks. The other thing about being a supervisor is, you can do a lot of the things yourself or delegate. To me, that's one of the best ways. If you want someone to have a really great deployment, delegate them a task. For instance, hey, you know what? I need someone who can make sure that every morning by 9 o'clock, I have inventory in all these items, right? Give somebody something to be responsible for, right? We're adults, treat everybody like that. Giving people some of that leeway, right, just shows that you've got trust in them, right? Those are the things that are really important to people. And again, as we touched a little bit last week, behavior issues need to be addressed as soon as a situation arises. Sometimes people don't know, sometimes, just a conversation, always away from the rest of your team. Hey, you need to understand this was not appropriate because, right? And giving that person the opportunity to change that behavior. If it's a little difficult for you to do that, particularly the first time or two, or maybe you've already spoken to someone and you're not quite sure how to handle it as that behavior has continued, then you go to the shelter manager and say, I need your help on this. But the worst thing that we can do as supervisors is to let that bad behavior continue, right? Because bad attitudes and bad behaviors are contagious, and you don't want the rest of your team to say, well, that person's getting away with that, right? Good attitudes are contagious, bad attitudes are contagious as well. Right, so supervisors and the daily shelter operations. We talked also a little bit about there are differences between working day shift and night shift, right? Day shift, you've got a lot more activity. People are coming, a lot of more foot traffic. You're speaking to headquarters personnel a lot more. You may get, the visits, everybody, the mayor, the governor, right? People are coming in to see what's going on. You may have EBVs that are coming, which is our event-based volunteers coming in to help out. And we may have, not a lot lately, but we do have the unsolicited donation management, right? That's something that generally takes place during the day as well. So day shift has a lot more things happening, but you usually have a lot less clients that are actually in the shelter during the daytime. So night shift, we had talked a little bit about, this is when we are reporting our client count in the evenings. It's our opportunity to do cleaning and housekeeping throughout the facility, walk around, make sure there are not any problems that you see. I was at a shelter 2 years ago and night shift, and we walked in the bathroom and somebody literally busted the sink off the wall. We didn't know about it because nobody said anything, and it wasn't majorly leaking, but it had been literally broken. So use that opportunity right in the evening just to kind of do a walk around. Again, night shift is a fabulous opportunity to get to establish those relationships with the clients, right? They will be there, say from about 5 to 10 when we turn off the lights, people are there. You can get to know them. You can build those relationships. This is why a lot of us really, truly love night shift. And what I always say is, Remember, you've got a 50% chance that you may end up on night shift. Go in with the right attitude. Realize that you have just a really great opportunity to get to know your clients. It's also time the shelter manager may have a couple special projects that they're looking for you to do at nighttime because they're too busy during the day. Right, you're making coffee and setting up breakfast in the morning, and it's the opportunity to do any reorganizing or restocking in the kitchen, particularly maybe you've got your unsolicited donations, maybe you've got a room you need to go and do a little bit of straightening out of stuff. So use the night shift as sort of your housekeeping and preparing the shelter for the next day's activities. Meetings, very important. I think we touched on this a little bit last week as well. Shift change meetings that occur between your day shift to your night shift. And again, between night shift and day shift. So this is the opportunity to share any information with them. What has happened, right? Any problems, any emergencies that might have taken place, any questions or inquiries or issues that you've had with clients. One quick thing, make sure we have shelter logs, we have shelter manager logs. If you have situations that arise, I've got a medical emergency, I've got a problem with the client, somebody was evicted, or I had to call the police. The shelter manager log is where you want to log this information, but you need to make sure that you are sharing that with the next shift. Because what happens is we get busy, we don't always have a chance or think about, gee, I need to go check the shelter manager log, particularly if the shift is getting on the hectic side. So tell the next person, the next supervisor, hey, we had a couple things, take a look and catch up in the shelter log or the shelter manager log. What you don't need to do is you don't need to say at 12:25 feeding showed up with lunches, right? We want to use the logs to keep track of things that are not part of the everyday doings within the shelter, if that makes sense. And again, right, maybe you've got clients who asked a couple questions during the evening, and you may pass that on to day shift and say, hey, can you make this phone call? This was the question that was asked, and could you please get back to so-and-so? In client meetings, people used to do client meetings a lot more than they do. For some reason, a lot of people had gotten away from it. I think on one hand, things get busy, there's a lot happening, we end up with maybe much larger shelters. But client meetings to me are really, really important. Again, this is a place where even if I have no new or additional information to share with clients, I can still reiterate the rules. Hey, remember we talked about smoking is around the back, or whatever my rules may be, whatever. Hey, we're making sure everyone knows this is what time lunch is, or hey, the fire marshal may be coming in with an update on what's happening, right? So we're using that as sort of an introduction to get the clients, right? I'm sharing information with them. I'm giving them the opportunity to come back to me with anything they're concerned about, right? If clients have questions or they have problems or they have gripes, this is the opportunity for them to air them. And what's important is if you can get people to tell you what's going on, it gives you an opportunity to address the situation or provide them with information that they're not sure about. So that two-way information, again, helps go to build those relationships, right? We want our clients to feel that they can trust us, but we've got to have that communication going. Sometimes it'll be a one-on-one, a client will come up and have a conversation with you, right? But this is an opportunity, and there may be a question that multiple people are thinking, one person is the one bringing it up. So make sure. Usually do this as my shifts are changing. I usually have like night shifts stay over for a little bit. I usually try and do this like about 7-ish.
Hey,
All right,
Jody.
tips are about, yes.
Yes, we have 2 questions. Any tips on handling a client who is distressed and being overly noisy during quiet hours?
Yes, so the first one is, if you happen to have mental health on site, you may stop by and say, hey, could you please go talk to Mr. So-and-so? If you don't, as a supervisor, or even if the shelter manager is still there, go by and have a conversation. Talk to them, see if you can find out what's going on. Is there something that you can do to help them? Sometimes people are just stressed and they just need to talk. If things escalate, that's a different story. If we have mental health on site, it's always great to be able to send them. If things escalate and where we're seeing that there's a problem that we don't think we can handle, we've got LSAP, as well as we always can use a 911. And I have had to do that on cases. That is always a last resort, right? But sometimes there just isn't a way to settle a client down and their behavior is really starting to disturb others.
We have a question from Susan Hickson. How do client meetings work when the shelters are really large?
I think we kind of touched a little bit about that. So that can be a little trickier, and a lot of times people aren't able, they're not doing meetings. What I have done in the past is if I've got a large shelter, then I will take myself as a shelter manager, my day shift supervisor, my night shift supervisor. We will sort of split the population. This is inside. And we will each sort of take a group, if that makes sense, of clients, and have our own little meeting off to one side, right? Kind of put people in areas of the shelter to try and have sort of more of an intimate meeting if we can. I've also had to actually get a microphone or a bullhorn at times, especially when we're in large buildings. And we've had to do a meeting like that. Sometimes you have to just kind of figure it out. There isn't a one size fits all. You may have to get creative. To me, I do the very best I can to figure out how can I do a meeting, even if it's in smaller groups. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. We talked a little bit about tips for evaluations. As a supervisor, you are responsible for the evaluations of the service associates under you, right? Pay attention, take notes so that when you have to do their evaluations, you've got some material to work with. Give specific examples. Mary developed really great rapport working with the clients, right? Be specific. John was very meticulous in taking care of our daily inventories, right? If you have somebody that you have an issue with, do a compliment sandwich. Everybody, no matter what happens, you can find something good to say about them, right? John took good care of our inventory and was very meticulous. Underneath that, John had a few issues with his temper, or however I'm going to do this. But address a behavior and not attacking the person, right? So remember, an evaluation is to help somebody learn and let them know what they need to improve on. You have to be constructive about it so you're not attacking the person and they don't look at it and go, this is garbage, and throw it away, right? So go to your supervisor, go to the shelter manager, right? If you need help working on your evaluations. Very importantly is that volunteers, there should be no surprises when somebody gets that evaluation. If you do your job right, you handle issues when they occur. When a volunteer gets an evaluation that specifically says, John had problems with his temper on this situation. We had a conversation and he has figured, he has changed his attitude, or however you want to do it, right? But never let a volunteer be surprised by something that shows up on their evaluation.
Got 2 questions for you. Do EBVs get evaluations?
No.
Yep.
Because they are not that I've ever heard of. Well, they're coming in and they're volunteering their time. I may be wrong in that, but I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I don't believe
I've
they're
never
part of.
given one either.
I don't think they're
Right.
part of the normal system. They need to be a general volunteer, I believe, to
Right.
get an eval.
Right.
Another question is from Art Webb. Have worked in shelters with no security, light security that walks through every few hours and sworn officers sitting in the shelter continuously. Is that a shelter manager decision or HQ? Is there a security policy?
Hi, Art. Okay, so say this one more time. So they've got security and they're in the building, or they're outside of the building?
I think the question is, what determines the level of security at a shelter? Is it HQ? Is it the shelter manager? Or what dictates a security policy?
So the shelter manager is the one who has an idea of the circumstances in their shelter. So they've got the best idea to talk to headquarters and say, we feel, we need security for this reason. LSAP, right? Again, life safety, asset protection, will also come through and evaluate a shelter and may have a conversation with the shelter manager saying, gee, it looks like you need to get some security here. Depending on states that we are in, there are some states that when a shelter is opened, security is automatically put into place, usually law enforcement. If you feel that you need security for whatever reason, I always tell everyone, reach out to your supervisor. We'll have that conversation. And because again, the safety of my volunteers and my clients are my priority, right? So if I call you on the phone and say, hey, what's going on? And you tell me this, and I'm like, okay, I am on this. All right. So if there's a concern, speak up.
Okay, I forgot to add there is a 13-minute warning till the session ends. Yep. The next question, I don't know if we want to save it. Do local chapter volunteers get evaluations if they get evaluations if they work several days without being deployed to the DRO?
Let me run through. I think I've only got 2 more left, and then we'll come back.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. So just a couple action items before your next deployment, right? We want to make sure that everyone's got a Red Cross email. I know there's a lot of us, and that included me for quite a few years, who didn't have one. Get a Red Cross email. It's going to make a really big difference. Understand, right? Texting, particularly how to do Teams. Think like a shelter manager. Look at mass care classes, not only sheltering, but feeding. What else are you interested in? And then also, download some of these forms. Start taking a look at registration forms. We don't use 6409s very often anymore, but it's still a good thing to know how to fill it out. Staff request forms as well, and evaluations. And learn technology. My Achilles heel. I'm still trying to do this part myself, right? But these are items that will make a big difference when you get ready to deploy for the next time. And my last slide. So a great leader, be it supervisor, shelter manager, HQ shelter manager, anyone, right? Acknowledges when someone does something well, right? Take pride when your team does something good, right? Let them know about it and give credit where credit is due, because it's not about us. It's about my team. We did this. It's never you did something, I did something, right? And if somebody says, wow, you did great on this, the conversation should go, thanks, but really my team did this well, right? Again, there's a behavior issue, address it. And praise is free. Share it generously. A thank you to somebody for doing something for you goes a really long way. Again, set an example, right, to your supervisors, the other shelter managers, and anybody you work with, right? Thank you is so easy to say, or you did a really great job, right? A little sentence like that can really make somebody's day. Okay, so let's go back around. So what was our question?
Yeah, let me scroll back up.
Something about evals?
Yes, something about deployment. So do local chapter volunteers get evaluations if they have worked several days without being deployed to the DRO?
Hmm.
I think that answer is no.
So, right. So you have to be deployed on the operation in order to get an evaluation. And you know what, a lot of times local people can get put on the evaluation, can get put on the operation, and then they will be eligible for an evaluation. And to be honest, there are times that I haven't realized local people have not been assigned, right? So to me, it's really important that you get yourself assigned to the operation if you want to be part of it.
Are there any more questions out there? And I believe there's a poll too. Can you talk a bit about how to keep volunteers from getting discouraged when a shelter is empty? That's a good one.
Actually, that's one of my favorite. So what I always tell people is nothing is ever a waste, right? So a shelter without clients has got a couple things. One, it's always a good exercise to walk through, right? I've set it up, I've got it going, nothing's happening, I'm breaking down, right? We're still going through the exercise, right, to streamline it. The other thing is you need to keep things in context. This is not about us. We come out to be there to help people, but what we need to remember is if you don't have clients that are coming to a shelter, that means the disaster may not have affected them. They may have had somewhere else to go, because let's be honest, a shelter is the last place that anybody wants to be. So we need to remember this isn't about us. Texas, right? Texas always gets nailed. And so I've been out before a couple of years ago, and I had to remind this lady who was really bent out of shape that we had no clients, that they dodged the bullet because the hurricane turned directions, right? But this is Texas, and we will be back the next time. And that's not to say people are going to be that lucky next time. So if you open a shelter and you don't have clients, think of it as a blessing for the people who didn't lose their homes, weren't flooded out or burned out, right? We are there in the case that we are needed. But if we're not needed, that's actually a very good thing.
Agreed. Thank you. Debbie Spoons has a question. Can family members help a client move out of a shelter or move from a shelter?
To come in and help with pack their stuff up and stuff like that.
I believe that's a question. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, we've had, if we know who they are, yes. Then we've had people come in to help move, particularly if they're picking up someone who may be a senior or has got children. So yes.
A lot of great jobs, Jody. I think you did great.
Good. Okay. No more questions?
Any other questions out there?
Oh, somebody's got their hand up. Or is it just
I believe that was Debbie Spoons.
Okay.
And I think we answered her question. I've unmuted her just in case.
Okay.
And I just wanted to, before anyone signs out, our next session is going to be next week at the same time. It's going to be covering, this is going to be a good one, how to read the IAP and doc portal. It's going to be a live demo of the doc portal, which basically I believe is the door, right? I'm sorry, the IAP and being able to read the documents for the DRs.
Very important, actually. That will be a really good one. Right. And if anybody's got any comments, please feel free.
Okay, I do have a quick question.
Okay.
I noticed you'd mentioned that if we have SAs coming that work day shift and were put on night shift, they're to have a 24 hours. Is that what you said?
If they come in days and they work nights.
If we had some people transferred from one shelter and they were on day shift, and they arrived at our shelter. They got off at early at like 5, and they got to our shelter by 7, and were then shifted to night shift after they'd worked the entire day, from 7 until 5. And my supervisor demanded that they go ahead and work the night shift from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And I kept saying that's not reasonable, that it was do it or else.
Yeah,
What recourse do we have on something like that? Because one of them was extremely vocal and angry, so I just sent her to bed. Said, we just needed her to go get some sleep because she could not have been of any help. The other one was exhausted, but he demanded she stay. What do we do with something like that?
You know what, that's a really hard situation. And there's a lot of us that literally have flown all day, hit headquarters, and been assigned to night shift. Okay, so a couple things. One is it shouldn't have been done like that. You're right. They should have been able to get off shift, go to sleep, right, and then show up for the next shift. In the occasion that something like that happens, because there is no other recourse but to have that team work nights, my suggestion is, so what I always tell people is when you work night shifts, you're on, you are up, right? Because again, you're watching what's happening in the shelter. You're there for your clients' safety. So we're not sleeping. The one thing about that is if I've got someone in those circumstances and I am desperate, I have no other choice but to put them on, I will say, look, I'm really sorry. I know this is not ideal. Why don't you guys switch off? You go and sleep for a few hours, get up, and then let so-and-so go and lay down as well, right? It's kind of an ad hoc, way to do things, but as a last resort, right? If all my clients are asleep, I'll tell someone, go crash for a few hours. As long as there is somebody up and awake, I can do that, right? But as soon as they've gotten off the next day, they've slept, they come back the following night for the night shift, that's it. They're up, they're on, you're awake for your 12-hour shift.
I want to add that as a volunteer or as a paid staff or volunteer, you always have the option of saying no. And I also wanted to make sure that workforce safety should be the number one priority. I don't think that's what happened in Ian. I witnessed firsthand myself that it didn't happen. But there are times that as a volunteer, as the person that getting assigned, you have the opportunity to say no. And you can say, no, I cannot do that. And if the person that is assigning you or the team leader is resistant to that, you have the option to go to workforce, to staff advocate and to advocate for yourself. And so they can, there's always a chief of staff that also advocating for us. So there are multiple ways that we can do. It's not just that, let's say the supervisor says, no, you have to stay on. You have more people to go above and beyond that you can reach out to when it comes to the safety reason. Because volunteer safety, workforce safety is number one priority for myself. So then I wanted to make sure that whenever I sent teams out, that they're safe. And sometimes I think in headquarters that we're blindsided of who worked which shift. So we might not even know that you worked that particular shift. It happened to me multiple times when I was going in and I just landed and they said, well, can I have you to come into the headquarters right now? Not knowing that I basically just landed. So there are ways that we're able to advocate for ourselves as well. But Ian was particularly bad, and I know of that. And I think that's another reason that we're doing all this now, so we can prepare our workforce better. And I do want to share the poll results with you that I did a poll that says, do you feel more prepared for deployment after 4 sessions of this division series? We have 6% of people said somewhat prepared. We have 55% of people said more prepared than before. And we also have 39 people or 38% of people says I'm ready to deploy. And for the questions I asked, what more topics would like to see, that we have multiple people seeing training techniques, super evaluations, outside sheltering, shelter challenges, large shelters or health issues, culture background, Spanish language, people in the shelter, volunteer comfort, practical limitations, and simulation situations. I want to thank everyone for participating in the poll, and we'll go ahead and prepare more sessions as well. Thank you so much, Jody and John, for moderating and for hosting this. John did really a wonderful job. Jody, this is her 4th time presenting. She basically presented the whole entire month. And today she really did good with technology. She did all her own slides. Thank you so much. Jody, you're the best. You really are the best.
Thank you for your help.
You really did good. John, do you want to close it? I see like several hands popping up.
Yeah, actually, there are actually 2 more questions really quick. I think it was from Ann Cutchins. That was basically about, I think we're out of time though. We're at 7:01, so sorry. No, thank you for this opportunity. I think is great. If Jody, if you want to stay online to maybe answer some questions that some folks may have.
Sure.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
So the next questions that we had was from. Hold on, I'm getting some feedback. And Cutchin suggested in chat following, you can also do shout outs at the shelter meetings to do clients to clients who have pitched in and utilize them for translation at those meetings. What's your take on this, Jody?
Oh, yep, absolutely. You're right. That's perfect, Ann. Yep, great. That's a great suggestion. All right. Sometimes you forget about things like that when you're trying to write out a presentation. Particularly, that one works really great, especially with like teenagers.
And I think that's all, unless I'm missing some questions. If anybody wants to type in chat, any last remaining questions?
I have a question.
Sure,
but it's just real quick. All right, getting back to this working 24-hour shift. What happens if you deploy in a shelter and, like I said, you've been traveling all day, and you get there and they want you to work the night shift as soon as you walk out on the floor, and you're tired and you say no. And the reality of it, what actually happens from that point? And are they allowed to ding you on your eval for it?
Absolutely not. Okay. No, look, I mean, we've all done that and been in those circumstances. If you get in and you're whipped and you're like, I just can't do that, then it is what it is, right? Then they will have to come up with a plan B, regardless of what that is. And that will have no effect on your evaluation.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
A question from Carol. What about security of our personal belongings? That's a tough one.
In the shelter, yep. So usually what we try and do is we usually try and find a room away from the clients that maybe that we can keep things in. Sometimes, to be really honest, my backpack is, I've just got it by the registration desk where I know that there's somebody all the time. Or I'm trying to find somewhere that I can stash it. We kind of do the best we can on that one.
Yeah, I think for me, I leave things in the trunk of the car. Like if it's a laptop or electronics, I just leave my valuables, in the trunk and don't really bring anything into the shelter that I don't want to lose. Another question, I'm not sure how to read this one. Does help need ID if the help comes in the shelter to help clients discharge from the shelter? What do you mean by help? Does help need ID if help comes into the shelter?
A relative or something who's coming to help somebody leave?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. If somebody's coming in to help, do they need ID to come into the shelter?
what I would do generally if say that somebody's coming in to pick up family, what we would do is we would help whoever it is move their stuff into the lobby, right? And then that person can take and help load their stuff from our registration area / lobby into the car or whatever they're doing. I'm not going to have them hanging out in my dormitory, right? But we can move it right into the front and then they take it from there. And if they're just picking it up in the registration area, right, they're not getting in my dormitory area, so I'm not looking for anybody's ID. It's not like that. And that's my personal way of doing it, right? Somebody else could be doing it differently. But again, the objective is to keep people out of your dormitory area that are not sleeping there, right? So if I'm dropping someone's belongings by the registration desk, they're good to go.
Debbie has a question about, is there a dress code for EBVs?
No, I mean, we tell them the same thing, right? We'd like them to be in, closed-toe shoes, pants, shirts. Sometimes depending on where you are in the weather, you're going to have EBVs who show up in shorts, and we have to be really careful. I guess as a shelter manager, you need to use your discretion. Let me do that. One, right, we generally have EBVs in vests. And on occasion, I might have to take a teenager aside and just kind of say, this tank top isn't quite appropriate for what we have here. Can your mom drop you off something?
And
I don't think I've ever really had pushback.
I do believe also EBVs from, when they're requested, we put out kind of a, what we need, and we have a dress code that usually, like, wear your shoes, wear pants, for example, if you're going to be working with equipment, et cetera, et cetera. I also have the case. So this is a good question. Will an eval be done if it was just for a short-term shelter and not a DRO?
No.
A short-term shelter and not a
Yeah.
DRO. You mean
In other
like
words,
local?
you had a dad event and you had to open up a shelter, and just because the county asked you to, because they thought they might need a evacuation point or something, and nobody shows up, and it's not part of a DRO, it doesn't blow up. It just doesn't happen. But you opened up a shelter.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume the answer is no.
I think from my experience, I've only seen evals done, or the option to do evals for others in level 2s or higher, and if they were on for more than a certain amount of days.
3 days.
Yeah, I believe that's what I've seen so far. Hope that answers the question.
At 3 days, you can request one on a DR, but I haven't heard that for something local either.
7 days. Meredith said 7 days.
7 days is required.
Right.
7
yeah.
days is
7 days
required.
is required, but at 3 days, you can request one. At which, that's, you have to make that decision. If you feel that you've done the job, do they know what you've done? I've been there for 3 days, I can ask somebody for an eval. But at 7 days, we are required to do one.
And as Grant and others have said, we can always go back to paper evals if we want to do a custom one.
Right. And I did see there was something in there about how do we know if an eval was ever written or filed. That took me a while to figure out because it's on your volunteer connection. I know there's an area you scroll down to that shows the name of the operation, how many days you did it and the whole bit. And if you go all the way to the right, there's a place for evaluations and it will say, what does it say? Completed or completed. And if you click on that, it will pull it up. So I like electronic evaluations for a lot of reasons. The only reason I don't like it is when I do them and I forget, right? I can't print it out and go over it with somebody. And that's part of why I have that conversation, right? Have a conversation, let somebody know how they did. But if something happens and you weren't able to do it, you can always go back, do a paper copy one, and then they can make arrangements to get it to the region and have it put in somebody's volunteer connection.
Awesome. Yeah, so we're at 7:09, almost 7:10 p.m. I think that's a wrap.
And David Tuckman, I want to let you know I did see your comment about LSAT. So that's very cool, actually. Yep, I think we're good.
All right, great. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this call, and we'll hopefully see you next week for the IAP and Doc Portal live session.
Thank you,
All right.
John.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Anyway.
everyone.
Are we having a
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good
We'll
night.
talk to you later.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good night.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, make sure to log your